I want to say we probably spent 10 plus hours on this application. It's very detailed, and they really do look for students that have different needs and different areas of interest. It's not a cookie cutter program. And so with Christopher, he's very into the film industry, and one of the other kids, he's really into vet life, which is great at Davis. They have a great vet program. Another kid is working in the agricultural because they have the wineries up there. So they really do encourage the kids to follow their passions and then help them navigate the system. And then they work alongside the faculty at UC Davis so the curriculum is accessible to our kids.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to We Time Convo. I'm Liza, and today we're talking about something that doesn't get talked about enough, what really happens after high school, especially for families navigating disability, supports, and the huge shift into adulthood. Graduation is supposed to be exciting, but for many families, it can also feel like stepping off a cliff when services, structure, and support systems suddenly change. Today, I'm joined by my guest hosts, Michelle.
Hello.
And Marita.
Hello.
Who both bring real-life experience and perspective to this transition. We're going to talk honestly about independence, fears, expectations, and what families really need to know before that last day of high school comes. So I'm very excited. Thanks for joining us, Michelle.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Marita.
You're welcome
for joining me.
Thank you.
So, Michelle, let's start off by telling us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I'm very excited to be here. My name is Michelle Capriati. I am originally from California, moved to Arizona, have been back in the Bay Area for about 4 years. I'm a special education teacher. I've been teaching for about 27 years, have spent the last 10 years in special education. I have 4 kids of my own. They're 29, my daughter, and then I have a 27, a 24, and a 20-year-old son. And 2 of my sons are students with disabilities. And when my youngest son, Christopher, 20-year-old, has a severe cognitive impairment and autism. So I've been doing work in special education, advocacy, and education for quite a while.
You're a super mom. Thank you for everything that you do. So today's episode, we are going to talk about transitioning from high school to post-secondary life, especially under the disability lens. So since you have experience, obviously, with that, my question for you, Michelle, is what was the biggest shock after high school ended for your 2 kids?
So their journeys were very different. My son, that is 27, had an IEP all throughout school from the age of 3 forward. And so his journey was a little bit more linear. He did, average to above average in high school. He wasn't quite ready for the 4-year track right after high school, but he knew he wanted to go to college. So he went to junior college, did extremely well, and then went on to apply to NYU. He is in the arts, and film production is really where he wanted to land. And he ended up doing exactly what he said he was going to do, which was to go to NYU. And he was able to really advocate and work within the system to generate a plan for himself, and landed exactly where he wanted to land, and now lives in New York and works in the industry, which is more than I could have ever imagined when he was 3 years old and initially diagnosed with autism. He was nonverbal. He would bang his head. He would flicker lights. He never slept. I mean, the thought of him going to college at that point in time was like nothing I could have even imagined, thanks to many of his amazing educators throughout the years that really kept him moving forward and finding his niche. I think in high school, he really he went to a smaller high school. It was a public high school, but it was very small, less than 500 kids, which for Arizona is like almost unheard of. His graduating class only had about 80 kids in it, and he was really able to hone in on his skills. He was in yearbook and film production, and was really allowed to shine. And I think I will always thank his teachers and his principal from high school that really set him up for success later at NYU.
Amazing. You must be so, so proud.
Yes.
So just kind of backtracking here, for those who don't know, what exactly is an IEP? Can you explain what that is?
Okay, an IEP, the acronym is for Individualized Education Plan. It services students with disabilities. It ranges in ages from 3 to 22. There's a qualifying process that students go through. They are tested. There's psychological assessments. There's academic assessments that students partake in through the public school system. And looking through those lenses, we identify the strengths and weaknesses of students and determine if they are going to need specialized academic instruction in order to access a free and fair public education.
So, like, we all know I'm a teacher as well. And so there are other different types of supports for us students. So not everyone knows this, that there's a 504 plan and an IEP plan.
Yeah, my daughter had a 504 plan.
Can you explain what the differences is? Do people start out with maybe what's called a specialized study team, and then they go to 504, they go to IEP? Or is it some kids get 504s? Or is it the whole gamut? Like, what's the difference between a 504 and IEP? I know, but the other people.
Yeah, so generally it starts off with like an SST, which is like a team evaluating. It usually involves a general education teacher, usually like an MTSS team who could be like a reading specialist. Really kind of depends on the age of the student who you invite to that team, and administration as well. And from that lens, we're able to sometimes put in supports that like are UDL, like Universal Design for Learning. Like maybe a student just needs access to an audiobook, or maybe the student needs copies of class notes, things that are pretty accessible to all students. If that's not working, then we kind of start looking at these two different pipelines, a 504 plan versus an IEP. The biggest difference between an IEP and a 504 plan is if you have an IEP, you need to have service minutes attached to academic goals and outcomes. So a 504 plan is, generally speaking, accommodation. So if the student needs extra time on an assessment, or extra time to complete work, or preferential seating because they need to be sit near the front of the room, they need breaks throughout the day to some of our students with attention deficit disorder just need a movement break. So those types of accommodations are generally best met through a 504. When you're looking at an IEP, now you're starting to look at different routes of delivering education. If they need specialized academic instruction from a special education teacher, now we're talking about a 504 plan, an IEP plan. And in that plan, you have goals that are specifically written for the student based on their area of qualifying need. And those minutes are then serviced by a special education teacher, either in the general education or sometimes in a pull-out situation, depending on the age of the child and the needs of the child, where those services are best delivered. But there's actual minutes attached to a goal.
So she mentioned an acronym that I don't think most people know. MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. Those of you out there, that's like the latest, like in all our teacher professional development, it's like the last 7 years have been about MTSS.
Yeah, we have a team, our school where we work.
Yeah.
That's I guess a new thing.
Right? Yeah, it usually includes admin, like a reading specialist, hopefully someone with a good math background.
Yeah.
So it's a team that has a multi-lenses brought to the conversation.
So were there any supports that disappeared for your kids after high school graduation?
Oh, you start all over.
Yeah.
Yeah, what it looks like. So really the buckets I kind of look at as a parent and as an educator. You have this initial bucket. So if your child qualifies for an IEP, it might be at 3, which both of my kids were identified for the need for an IEP the day they turned 3 years old. They were in public school. They both were we were living in Arizona at the time, but California has a very similar plan where kids that are not meeting their developmental milestones early on, their pediatricians can refer them out to state agencies and work with you to develop like a family. It's similar to an IEP, but it's meant for kids that aren't in school yet. And it kind of encompasses the things that happen at home. So both of my boys had those plans. So we were working. By the time they were a year old, my kids were receiving services in speech and occupational therapy and those types of things because they weren't developing and meeting those milestones. So at 3, we were kind of already in the pipeline for those services. So the initially like 3, 4, and 5, they were in like a pre-K program. And then once they turned 5 and started kindergarten, that becomes like the next bucket, like the K through 6 or K through 5, depending on what that elementary looks like. And then you've got the middle school bucket. Then you've got the high school bucket. And then after high school, depending on what that looks like, you've got the post-secondary life. California is very forward thinking. And 3 years ago, I'd have to get the exact date, they actually created a pathway for graduation. So students actually now have a diploma track in California, which is something that all states have. Christopher does not have a high school diploma. He went to high school, but he was basically like certificate of completion. He does not possess a high school diploma because Arizona does not offer that, which makes it difficult because when a lot of employers, that's a basic need that they need. And so California was very, aware of that for employability's sake and now have an alternative pathway for graduation.
Thank you. So, what do you think that parents overestimate or underestimate about adulthood readiness?
I think they overestimate maybe what kind of supports are going to be there and that you get to step away a little bit. And I think you have to step in more than less. You're navigating a whole new set of systems. Now, students do have access to their public school of attendance until their 22nd birthday. So 3 to 22, they're still part of the public school. So, like Christopher, right now, we live in the Los Gatos public school system. And so he attends classes at West Valley, but he's under the umbrella of the Los Gatos Unified School System until he ages out. It's after that, it's like, what do we do now? That's where, you always have to kind of be forward thinking and knowing what the options are, because a lot of your services get peeled back as soon as they leave that safety net of that 3 to 22 IEP environment.
So earlier we were talking before we started recording that Christopher is planning to continue on post-secondary. And so when you say that he got a certificate of completion for high school in Arizona, how is that impacting his ability to apply to colleges? Is it, or the fact that he's at West Valley, then it's okay if he gets his AA degree from West Valley, then it's okay that he doesn't have a high school graduation diploma, that he has a certificate of completion. How does that work?
So he's not in any kind of diploma track. We're not able to, or I should say, he's not able to complete those necessary requirements for like reading and math and science. So he's not diploma seeking. So there is a College of Adaptive Arts at West Valley, and many Foothill. There's several junior colleges in the area that have this program. ThinkCollege.net is a good place, a good resource for parents to look at to find where these different programs are, because they're nationwide. He won't be ever getting a diploma. It does make it challenging at some levels, but because the law is relatively new, there's many kids that do not have a high school diploma that graduated. And, if you graduated this year or last year, I think the first year that kids will be actually graduating with this diploma is this year. So it's still relatively new.
Yeah. So are a lot of parents that are in the situation where their students are in high school, when should they start thinking about transitioning to the post-secondary world? Or how do they get this information? Are they taught this information? Did you get this information on your own?
Yes, post-secondary becomes part of the conversation really when they're in high school. By the time they're 14, you really need to be having those conversations. And it actually is a page in the IEP. So there is a legally binding document. But really once the kids start going into high school, we really start talking to them about employability and talking about developing those executive functioning skills, like getting to class on time, because that prepares you to get your job on time. So we have a lot of those conversations very early on in high school. For me personally, I really started coaching my kids pretty diligently by the time they hit middle school, because I didn't want high school to be a big shock. And I did not know when Christopher was in middle school and high school, because we didn't move to California until 2 years ago, that the opportunities that he would be afforded were things I could not have imagined. I didn't think we'd be going to West Valley. Had we stayed in Arizona, his post-secondary program would have been a portable in the back of a junior high. The impetus for us moving to California was because there's so much more opportunity here. And we looked diligently at every program before deciding where we were going to kind of call home based on the programs that they were offering. And we knew that West Valley, Cabrillo, Foothill, those were the schools that we kind of had in mind. We didn't find out about the UC Davis Redwood Seed program until 2 years ago, which is an incredible program. It's a 4-year program for adults with cognitive impairment. So all of the students there have to have a cognitive or intellectual disability as their primary qualifying area for an IEP. So it's a 4-year program where they actually go to Davis, they live at Davis, they partake, they get to have all the experiences of a typical college student. They take elective courses through the UC Davis system, and then they take their life skills, but it's more like they take math, but it's more like budgeting, and they take reading, but it's all functional and workability based. And the goal of that program is employment.
And for those who don't know, we're from the Bay Area. So West Valley, Cabrillo, and what other school did you mention? Foothill. These are all Bay Area based community colleges, and UC Davis is a UC school.
Yeah, so if people go to thinkcollege.net, that you can click on your state and it tells you all the programs that are available in your state.
So just so I understand, so the UC Davis program is for adults with cognitive impairment. I want to make sure I say the right word. A program for them to get the college experience as well as prepare them to be people in the workforce.
Yes.
That's amazing.
That's so
So they
great.
graduated their first class, I believe 2 years ago was their first 4-year class to go all the way through. And they initially had a class of 8 students that finished the program. 6 of them stayed at Davis and are now living together as roommates and employed in the Davis area. Davis is very unique in the sense that it's a place you can easily access. A lot of our kids don't drive, and so it's public transportation, bike riding, walkability are really key things that people need to look out for. I mean, yes, we have Uber, but where we live, I can't even get an Uber to come pick him up. I could get an Uber to drop him off, but I can't get an Uber to pick him up because we live pretty remotely. So Davis offers that ability for them to function independently. So,
And are there more places that like this? I mean, you know about the Davis program, like is that Think.net where parents can go
yes.
to find similar programs in their state?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so UCLA is another one that has a program here in California. You have to look at a lot of times it's tied to your state of residency because a lot of their money for like Social Security and your hours of rehabilitation, all of those support hours that you get are state tied. So that the ability to access services is often structured so that those service hours move with them to the college. So it is a little state by state.
One more question. Do you know then, so the elective courses that these students, which are they like fully integrated into the regular university? It's not like it's a separate school. Like they're going to take an astronomy class with other UC Davis students that are in the same astronomy class. Is that?
Yes, they can choose whatever they like. And they really encourage them to in their application. It's a pretty detailed application. I want to say we probably spent 10 plus hours on this application. It's very detailed. And they really do look for students that have different needs and different areas of interest. It's not a cookie cutter program. And so with Christopher, he's very into the film industry, and one of the other kids, he's really into vet life, which is great at Davis because they have a great vet program. Another kid is working in the agricultural because they have the wineries up there. So they really do encourage the kids to follow their passions and then help them navigate the system. And then they work alongside the faculty at UC Davis to make it so the curriculum is accessible to our kids.
That's so exciting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. I had no idea. I wonder how many, parents out there know or don't know about this program. So that's great. Thank you so much. So we talk a lot about academics and post-secondary life. How about social life and, the workforce, and how did you prepare your kids for that?
Or dating.
Yeah, which is another episode.
Yeah, and I was like, dating's a whole nother conversation. I think socially is probably the hardest thing because you want it to be authentic. And I don't want to find myself micromanaging any of my children, whether they're completely functioning. My daughter's a 29-year-old attorney in Palo Alto. I don't believe in that. I don't think that makes our kids functional. And I don't micromanage Christopher either. Do I have to help? Yeah. He's got a group he's going out with. In fact, right after we finish recording this podcast, I'm taking him over to Oak Ridge Mall. So he's meeting up with his friends. Social is harder, especially I think it's harder for all kids these days. I don't think it's social media, I think, has given them a false sense of social life. And I can't say that he's any different than a typical 20-year-old trying to navigate a junior college, which is a whole lot bigger than your high school campus where you went to school with the same kids 8 hours a day. Now you're at this junior college and you go to a class maybe once a week or twice a week, and formulating friendships is much more challenging. I think for all kids at this age, it definitely is more difficult for kiddos with disabilities, especially with us. Christopher doesn't drive. He probably will never drive. And so he does get a little bit more reliant on us as parents to help. But I leave him, and, I do ask him and I prompt him and I encourage. And We utilize, the different systems that are available to us here in California. There's social groups that we've signed him up for. And he went to camp last year, Camp Creme up near Yosemite, and he made some friends there. And some of the kids were from the Bay Area. And we really fostered on keeping those relationships going after we came back from camp. So I think just tapping into your local networks, Facebook and all the things that we use for what I say pseudo relationships can become authentic relationships if the time is invested outside of that social media circle.
And I think Michelle and I were talking earlier about so my daughter's 21 and what it's like to the parenting after they're not living in your household. And it's I try not to, I only give advice when asked. I don't try to tell her my opinion unless she's asking, but it's so hard when you don't see them on a daily basis and you don't see the circle of friends anymore. So you're I don't know how to give you advice because I don't know this person you're talking about. So
yeah, and you have to, with Christopher, we do a lot of questioning because I always have to worry as a mom because he is very kind and very loving and very open-hearted and wants friends and know people's intentions. And so that's sometimes I have to kind of navigate a little bit more just through my questioning to make sure that the relationship is something that is going to be safe and healthy for all involved.
Okay. All my questions are answered here. Sorry, I have to pause, make sure I've got everything.
Let's see.
So what do you think? What would it look like to you when you think Christopher is independent? What does fully independent for Christopher look like? Like at 32, what do you think?
Good question. Yeah.
That's a question that I would have to say has changed about every year for me. Had you asked me that question 10 years ago, when we were just kind of in the thick of that first transition from middle school, up starting to look towards high school. And, I think for a long time I got stuck in the moment and just getting through the day and not necessarily the years. Once we got into high school, I really saw him blossom. He had an amazing teacher that started with him in 5th grade, moved with him to junior high, and then moved with him to high school. So she was his case manager, and that's virtually unheard of in special education. Oftentimes you have a case manager for a year, maybe 2 years if you're lucky. And to have the same one for almost 8 years, I really credit her to a big part of his success. And her and I working together in unison with sharing my goals for him and her goals for him. Because sometimes I would underestimate and she's like, Michelle, please stop. He's so capable. You need that partnership with your case managers and the other adults in their life because you can get as parents, you can get comparative and well, my other kids did this at this age and he's not able to, so therefore, and she's like, stop, and she would be the first to kind of you got to let him fail. You let your other kids fail because you're going to learn more from your failures than you are from your successes. So initially we kind of thought we'd be living in Arizona and post-secondary life was going to be this classroom in a portable behind the junior high, and he worked at the grocery store there as a bagger, and we kind of thought that was going to be our trajectory. And then we visited California. I'm from here, my family's here, and we just started seeing bigger and better, and we started exploring what life could look like for him. Oh my gosh, junior college, what? That's a possibility, because that wasn't a possibility in Arizona. He could maybe take pass-fail classes, but there wasn't a program per se at the junior college the way that they are here. And so that's where my husband and I really put together this 3-year plan of, right, we're going to let him finish high school. We wanted him because, again, he was in such a great environment. We had such a great case manager. He had amazing friends because he grew up with these kids. The kids knew Christopher from the very beginning, through elementary, through middle school, through high school. They knew him, and we feel like his social development would have been really impaired had we left. So I actually moved to California, established residency, did all these things to get my career continuing and growing, and flew back and forth every single weekend.
That's when I met you.
Yes.
First met me through that. You're she was like, wait, what? Your whole family's in Arizona and you're here? And then, yeah.
Yeah. So Monday through Friday, I was living here in the Bay Area. And then on Friday nights, I'd catch the Southwest 6 p.m. flight out. And then at 5 a.m. on Monday mornings, I got on the same plane and came back. And, yeah, did that so he could finish high school. And then as soon as he walked across stage, quite literally, we packed the U-Haul and moved to California, all in with the complete trajectory of junior college. We got through that first summer, and I just happened to be at a conference for teachers and found about this Davis program. I'm like, wait, what? There's a 4-year program? And then it really became all about getting him into the UC Davis program. He applied last year. He did really well. They only take 12 kids a year. It is a very small program because of the funding that's needed and required. And he was number 13 on the of 12. And so they're like, promise us you're going to apply again next year. We're like, the day it opens, we will have that application in. So he applied, and we actually found out last night that he's advanced to the interview stage.
Well, so and by the way, Chris is here. He's shy. He doesn't want to get on the mic, but congratulations. Yeah, congratulations.
So we'll have our interview in February, and then admission decisions go out.
You have to keep us
Oh my
updated.
gosh.
I'm so proud.
Just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
We're all waiting for March.
Wow. So, I mean, what would success for you look like, Michelle, if college wasn't on the path?
Employability.
Yeah.
He does work. He worked pretty consistently at the grocery store when we lived in Arizona. He was employed there for 2 years. The challenge is the work balance and your social benefits, because the money that they make, so once they become 18, they're eligible for Social Security as adults with disabilities. So it's not a lot of money. It's less than $1,000 a month. By no means can any person live off of that. And then it becomes, you want them to have, a productive day. But the minute they start working, that money starts getting deducted. And so it becomes this fine line of allowing them to have a fulfilled life. But simultaneously, you do count on these safety nets at some level. And it's not so much that I worry about today or tomorrow, because he's young. He's still able to be on my insurance because he's only 20. But I have to be forward thinking, like, what is it going to be like when he's 30 and he can't be on mom's insurance anymore? At some point he will outlive me. And so there's all these things you have to kind of keep in the back of your mind about providing for him, but also making sure that he can provide for himself. So employability is absolutely the goal, which is why Davis. But at the same time, he wanted to be like everybody else. His sister went to college. His brothers went to college. So he wanted to go to college. Like, he watched us drop his sister off at Northwestern and drop the other one off at NYU, and the other one went to Embry-Riddle. He knows that after you go to high school, you go to college, you live in the dorms, you do these things. He has seen it through his siblings, and he wants that and deserves that same opportunity. So now it's Davis. That's the goal. That's the plan. If that had not been the plan, we purposely bought our home with property so that we could build an ADU for him, because financially it's difficult to live in the Bay Area for anybody.
Yes.
And trying to live off, a Social Security check, like, that's never going to work. So we tried to put in places where he can be independent, but then at the same time have a safety net of a family.
Yeah. Well, that's all my questions for you. Well, my last question. Do you have any more questions, Marita?
No.
My last question is, what is your advice to any parents that are, letting go of their kids after high school, what to do? Because this is so much information, and it's so much great information. And I'm so happy that you're on here, telling your story and just this knowledge is like the UC Davis thing to me. I had no idea. What is your advice to any parents?
Build your village. And it was funny. My daughter said this quote to me. She's like, Mom, if you want a village, you have to be a villager. And I thought that was really powerful. And I was like, Kayla, where did you hear that? She's like, I don't know. But I think that's really important. Like, you have to show up for other people if you want people to show up for you. And we've been very lucky to have an incredible village. He has amazing siblings. I'm hoping to bring them on one day. I think it'd be really unique.
That would be great. Yes.
Their perspective as what it's like to have a sibling with a disability, because at the end of the day, at some point, he will at some level be their responsibility, because my husband and I won't be around forever, and he's very fortunate that he has incredible siblings that just love him, adore him, tease him, do all the things that siblings do, they do. And I'm very fortunate in that regard. But we also have an incredible network of social service providers. Like I said, we even had his same case manager all throughout his academic years through high school, and she was great. We've had amazing case managers in Los Gatos that have been really, really helpful to him. But we also have amazing friends, because sometimes it takes, I show up with Christopher pretty much everywhere I go. He's here with me today, and some people can be off-put by that, like, why is he here? And I'm like, well, what would you like me to do with him? He needs to get out and be socialized. And so making sure that your village understands your vision, and then keeping that village close.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Marita.
You're welcome for coming back on. Thanks for having me.